Speaking of sun, it looks like you've been getting a lot of sun, Mr. Hager.
Are we ready?
So
They all.
the hamster wheel spinning.
Speaking of sun, it looks like you've been getting a lot of sun, Mr. Hager. Are we ready?
Just a test. Hang on, you know. Funding sources might be, or where some support might be able to go. So what I did, we did a contract to kind of provide you with a summary of my recommendations as a grant writer, as someone who's been doing this. But I don't want to give you the summary and be like, all right, later. What I want to do is kind of walk through the summary with you. I can take 2 minutes, I can take 20 minutes, I can take 2 hours, whatever you like. But also, we're meeting again later this week to talk about some of these recommendations too. But I want to make sure that if you guys have questions as to why I may or may not have come to some conclusion, I want to make sure that I'm available to you and address any concerns that you might have or why I may or may not have chosen a certain recommendation. The comprehensive plan actually at the end has recommendations as well for potential grant funding. But my summary takes it to the next level of when, why, where, and how. And potentially in a timeline or when it makes sense to review, and then to go over that project with you to say, are we really eligible? Yes, it'd be great, and you probably are eligible, but is it going to make sense? Is it going to be worth it? The conversation we have in the next few minutes here, is extremely valuable in the fact that many communities will apply for a grant that they may not realize they're not applicable, that doesn't apply to them. They may not be eligible, they may not be properly prepared, they may not have their documents or design ready. And they may not have called the agency to say, hey, is this something you're looking at? Which are all things that really help a grant application move down the pathway before you spend too much money, which is really kind of what I like to do. I'm not in the business of just writing as many grants as possible. That's silly. Let's only write grants we can win and that are applicable and make sense. Brains work differently. I did it in an Excel spreadsheet and I did it in a narrative because some people like it in different forms. It also helps me to kind of understand it that way, and you can understand where I came to my conclusions. In the Excel spreadsheet, and this is supposed to be simple. Grants are difficult enough. We're trying to break this down. But what I did want to do is break it down into, what I did do was break it down into your comprehensive plan priorities. Because there are a number of grants out there all the time. And it's like, what about this one? What about this one? Well, you really want to focus on what are the town's priorities and does that fit the initiative, even to be reviewing them. Because if you hire a grant writer, you could be having that person reading grants all day because grants come out all day, every day. So you even want to bring it into, what are our top 10, 5, 3 priorities that we really want to be working on. And I think that where the town is now is in a good position to, put its feet in the water, know what's going on, but I'm trying to give you life vests. I'm trying to give you, the water shoes, a nice bathing suit that makes you look good, so we can go into the water and really have a good sweat, if you will. Just came up with that one on my own, but it was summer. And
I like it.
Once you have the gear, you feel a lot better. And so I wanted to just kind of walk through what I saw, what I not necessarily didn't see, but also just other potential areas besides just from kind of being here. As a community that just did a comprehensive plan, it's a fantastic investment, and it is so valuable when applying for grants. You have to have a comp plan. So all the communities that don't have comp plans, you're now ahead of them. So you're in a good standing. So it's a great time for you to be applying for grants. And it's a great way to say and to follow it by applying for grants that follow your comp plan and you're fulfilling your grant plan or your comprehensive plan, if you will. Also, the Friends in Service, the FISH organization, I did end up working with them a little bit, worked with their larger overhead, their parent group, which was Lifespan. As it turned out, my aunt had worked there for 20 years. And they're like, do you know Debbie Columbus? I'm like, Aunt Debbie? Is she there? They're like, yeah, she's retiring. I'm like, oh. So, but worked with them a little bit, and they weren't able, this was when the Mother Cabrini grant had come up that I want to make sure you guys were aware of. FISH would not have been eligible based on the eligibility of the budget size. However, their parent company was. So we reached out to them, of course, with 2 days to go, and they were already applying, but they now know that this area is looking for funding. So it's good to be on that community, that parents' radar. And also we identified, talking to the gentleman, Paul, there, that Rochester Community Foundation gives smaller grants, more of smaller grants, but based on FISH in that organization, that could be a really good fit. So that's something that I would recommend that the town look into a little bit more. If they wanted to have grant services, I would recommend taking, a couple hours to look at what they have with Rochester Community Foundation and what would be a good fit. It might be that there's a grant available right now. There might be a grant available in 6 months, but let's know about it and be ready to apply in 6 months. We talked about that, the tax incentive or assessment initiative. I just thought that was great that we were talking about trying to get ahead of that and meeting with the state and being able to potentially, what I found in other communities is really being able to explain the equalization rate. And that's kind of what that tax rate is. And so putting out a little flyer that kind of talks about it or gives people information. STAR program that came up too. Again, just information that you can put out to the residents so they're not surprised when they do or don't get a check. Library, I'm sure they're involved with a capital plan, but always good to, there's a state 5-year capital plan, and then the libraries are broken up into regions. I'm sure the library is engaged. I know that they have gotten funding, but they shouldn't be afraid to be asking every year. And then make sure that for every 5-year plan that the state puts together, they're in it every year. You don't get anything if you don't ask. Public water, I know there's pros and cons, and that's, so that might be something that the town or area might want to do a survey on. The spray park, ensuring that there's proper maintenance and funding, future funding for that. Spray parks are becoming popular, as you know, they're extremely popular. I haven't seen too many models of how they're being funded. I'm not working with a lot of organizations with spray parks right now, but the reality is that they exist. And so capturing other people's business models, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Maybe they're seeing that maintenance is an average of $2,500 a year, for a similar one. So that can be, thought out ahead of time and built into the budget. So we're not surprised, or hey, we applied Rochester Community Foundation for the spray park, or something like the YMCA, or something like tag on with the Ralph Wilson Foundation, something like that. Trails, always trails, and then MWBE. That's just something, there's a couple things that are coming obviously down the pipe from the state. What's even surpassed this at this point, MWBE was one of the top priorities for the state, but since the shootings, that has now absolutely turned, and it's gun control. However, another thing to really be looking out for is what they're calling disadvantaged communities. So it's a government phrase. It used to be called environmental justice or environmental justice areas. They're changing that, and a lot of times it's how is funding allotted. A lot of times it has to do with redlining and highways going right through and creating areas with stronger poverty and less have, if you will, as opposed to have and have nots. And that definition, you need to be careful or just on the lookout, because it's starting to make its way into legislation, which they're trying to pass, by Friday, because there's only 3 days left in, but am I boring you?
No, I just have 7:30. It's great.
I'm so sorry.
I love grants.
Okay, grants are great. Grants are great. They really are. Call me. But what they're doing is they're putting this definition in legislation, and it hasn't been officially defined, which is extremely difficult, particularly in the water and wastewater industry, because it could affect seeker permitting, and it could go back in time based on the way the wording is. So this is a fight that's kind of going on in the state legislature right now this week. As far as disadvantaged communities, they identified a committee of people to create this definition, but they're still meeting and they're still having public forums, and so the definition hasn't been created yet. But just something to be on the lookout for, because it's going to have its own definition, and it's going to change legislation. It's going to change the way things are written from this point forward in state policy. So just to be on the radar, just a good thing for you guys to know about. I'm sure once it comes out, there'll be different summaries, something like Association of Towns. They're definitely going to have a summary on that, and go with that there, right there in Albany, getting the top information, but just something to be aware.
I have a question. What is MWBE?
Minority, actually MW, yes, Minority Women Business Enterprise. So the state has, any business can become a minority, well, not any business, if you qualify, just like a grant, can become a minority women-owned business. There are eligibility elements to that. I'm my own business and my owner, but I'm not eligible yet because I haven't been in business a year, and that's one of the eligibility criteria is a year. Now, if a business wants to become an MWBE, they have to fill out an application, and those applications over the last few years have taken an average of 3 years to get, which is ridiculous. However, once you get that designation, every state contract is mandated that you make, it's beyond an attempt, and they change the words each year, that you reach out to MWBE identified businesses first if you're spending state money. So if you get a grant, that grant Each agency changes a little bit, but usually up to 30% of that grant has to be spent using an MWBE business. So Labella, whatever, if they're doing a project that was grant funded and it was $1 million of grant funding, they would have to either, if they're not an MWBE, which I don't believe they are, they'd have to subcontract out to another contractor and get at least 30%. Now, there are going to be instances, particularly in upstate New York, when you can't get that 30%. And there are waivers, but those are difficult, they're time consuming, and you're going against the grain, which is okay, but it's getting stronger. It used to be a recommendation. Then it was 15%, then it was 20%, now it's 30%. And the next one coming in is service disabled veterans. And that's a recommendation of a certain percentage every time you spend state money. What's great is to get some local businesses, particularly in upstate New York. MWB office is New York City. It's focused in New York City. It's very strongly on New York City. They have come up here, and I've actually been certified to help businesses become MWBE organizations through the new program. So, and now it's supposed to take 6 weeks. I'm one of 50 people that were certified to help a business do that. So if the town has a business that's interested in becoming an MWBE, you just want to help them, because what happens is if you put in an application, you get 2 mistakes, 2 corrections, and then you have to wait 2 years before resubmitting. So when I was sitting in the room with these 50 people they were training, and I was like, why didn't you just hire grant writers? We can't make 1 mistake. You know, and they had all these attorneys and they're going to pay all this money, and the mistake, you know, if they make a mistake, which they're going to do, it gets sent back, and that's a 6-week delay. And it was the program was really bad, so they rehauled it last year. And there's a new fast-paced process. I've only processed 1 application since then, and it hasn't been 6 weeks yet. So I'm hoping it'll be 6 weeks, but to go from 3 years to 6 weeks is incredible. But I can't say that that's exactly how it's happening at the moment, but that is they're hoping to be able to do that. So, and if you're an MWB registered business, you're automatically put on a state list. So if you pull up in your area, all the MWBE, your organization is going to be on there. It's much more advantageous for certain businesses than others. If you're a contractor, plumber, electrician, and you're a women-owned or minority business, get a certified. You're going to get more contracts than you can handle. If you're a caterer, you know, like I have a catering company like, should I become an MWBE? I'm like, you know, look at the contractor portal that comes out every day. See how many contracts are for catering. I don't think there's going to be that many. So don't, you know what I mean? If you're weighing your time and your options and your resources, that's something to think about. So sorry, tangent on the minority women business enterprise.
Isn't that why you see like Mary Smith's Trucking Company?
Oh,
Because a lot of times, you know, nothing, not that there can't be women truckers, but then that the wife of the company president or
It's
owner.
a great deal of
whatever.
fraud that took place.
Yeah.
And now and the woman has to own now 51%. People are like, oh yeah, sure, she owns 51%. But now that woman has to, if it's the woman or a minority, that person has to be the main signature and the main person making the final decisions. So they found that, they figured it out, took about 5 years to figure out that they were all scamming and doing that. Or one big company was breaking itself up into 10 little companies and having different people own them, but then they were all getting the money. So yes, lots have gone through, so they're trying to overhaul it to be like, no, this is a great thing, we got it. So we'll see.
So with these activities that we
Mhm.
talked to you about, and maybe I'm jumping ahead too far, but what you're really looking for us is kind of a rating for like which ones are prioritizing.
You know,
Is that
I guess what I want to talk to you guys about is that there are a couple of these that I would recommend kind of moving on now.
Mhm.
And there are, and that is an additional cost to actually write a grant, but I want to make sure that I provide conversation and questions that you would feel good about that before
Sure.
you just made that decision. The 2 big things are, I divided them in 2 categories, which is CFA, the Consolidated Funding Application Process, which we are in right now. due July 29th. And then there's others that are on different rotating scales. I would say the first thing that you would want to look at, based on your objectives and what you guys are looking at as far as priorities, would be for, I would have another conversation with Brent on planning. We had a meeting previously and talked about how to be most successful in grant funding is to have a plan and to have proof prior that why you need that funding. And it seems like the town has had a couple different areas of where they could potentially very much benefit from a plan. And particularly with the falls, you could be looking at a plan that includes multiple parts to it that could identify and support the need for fixes that need to be done and could be supported by the state. Now that could be a combination of wetlands. That could be a combination of flood zones. That could be a combination of zoning. So my recommendation first and foremost, and let's see, so that was under, I guess, revitalizing. Then I put it under comprehensive plan section. So under revitalize the Hamlet came planning study. And so there are a couple different planning grant opportunities. The two that I would recommend that you guys look at further to confirm eligibility based on what you're looking to accomplish would be the Climate Smart Community Grant, CSC, or the GIGP grant, Green Innovation Grant Program. So these programs are looking at they each have a little bit of a different objective. So based on what the town is looking to study, that's the one you would potentially want to apply for. And then, so I think that would be a conversation. I think that Brent, we had talked about planning, and I think looking through all the planning options, Empire State Development does have a Main Street program, but that is literally that's not for planning. Well, Main Street program does have two categories, planning and implementation, but Main Street is for businesses. So that's a different focus. And it's available every year. So you kind of want to look at what you're looking at and what needs to be done first. So and affordable housing, when it comes to affordable housing, that really is more of a conversation with Office of Community Renewal. You don't even necessarily need to be applying for a grant right now. You're working with that office, with that agency, because a lot of incentives are working with developers. So if you recognize what those are and you start to have a conversation with developers, or a developer comes to you and you now know what that office offers, it's more incentives than it is grants. But if your objective, which I saw here, was more affordable housing and housing diversity, that would be the avenue I would recommend. It could start setting that up, but that would really be more an agency than a grant application. Records management, which was another big one. No question, local government records management improvement fund grant. It is the hardest grant out there. It's a very long process, but it's worth it. I've written, I think, taken 7 different communities through this process. And if there's and I think I said to these guys, the only way to do it is if the town wants to do it, and if the clerk wants to do it, which it sounded like you might want to do it. These guys were like, well, Michelle's great, and she wants to get organized, so we'd have to talk to her, but I think it would be good if the clerk was like, oh no, hell no, I hate emails, I hate passwords, I'm never gonna scan a document, I'm gonna walk away.
You're happy.
That is opposite of me.
Yes, right, that's what they said.
More index cards,
I
right?
like that with paper, stop giving me paper.
So, and
Just email it to me.
yes, and the local records management improvement fund, it's not going to be due until probably March, but it's a 6-month application. You want to put 6 months into it. And when I work with a community, I work with you one-on-one. There's a regional representative, whether you work with me again or not, available from the state, New York State Records and Archives, that can come and help you through that and organize that. But it's that grant in particular, $75,000. However, there's no match. Like that doesn't have, local match, it's $75,000, and you can ask for it every year. So when you have someone with the ability and the foresight that Michelle has, you can do a 5-phase project and say, we're asking this year for $75,000 for phase 1. Next year, phase 2, and you're just letting the state pay for it, $75,000, because you're doing the state's objective, which is becoming digital. And so I've worked with organizations from boxes everywhere, and then you have to do an inventory to know what you have. Identifying the inventory of what you have and getting rid of what you don't need, which is the next step, and then scanning lots of
Sounds
documents.
like heaven to me.
And the good thing is that that $75,000 is to hire a consultant to come in to either take the documents and do the scanning themselves, or to come in here and help them do it. That would be a second job, totally. So most of that money always goes to, it goes to a consultant to come in and help you, depending on where the town is. And you can't do the whole time. We got to pick a department, any department. And then maybe we expand from there.
We're starting from ground zero.
So, and that's the thing too, and then we'll have the regional rep come down and take a look, we'll take pictures, and have them make a recommendation too. And then in the grant, you can say, as you can see from our pictures of our meetings with the regional rep, and they recommended this, this is why we're doing this path, and it's phase 1 of a multi-phase, and we decided to start with this department. Those grant applications are extremely intense.
I know exactly which department we should start with.
Is there anything, I mean, obviously it's multi-phase, do you think the highway department might be able to benefit from this also in future phases?
Town of Canandaigua did highway department for 15%.
7th phase.
Yeah.
7th phase?
And
Hey,
it,
you made the top 10.
it does depend, the bigger the sheet, the more expensive it is to scan, just saying. But if the town is, has a clerk, you have a very good situation where you should start that process. And she can start the process. It's online, it's going to be much easier if I do it with you, or working with other folks who have gone through it. Jeannie Chrisman, I've done Rushville, Canandaigua, Farmington. So great people to ask. They're gonna be like, oh my God, this program. They're not similar, they're different personalities.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of work, but you just go into it knowing this isn't gonna get done in 2 weeks.
No.
This is gonna be a 6-month application, and you've got a 5-year plan. And it's a lot easier to handle. You're just taking small bites. And if you want to take a year off, take a year off. There's no, they can grant seem big and scary, but they're not. So I would recommend that one. If you guys decide to do, if you wanted to, invest in grants, what I would recommend first is deciding, which I know we have a meeting on Thursday, is if you want to do any grants that are part of the CFA, because that's due in a month and a half, which is like tomorrow.
So if I can interrupt you.
Yep, please, I'm sorry.
And I thought I heard you say the climate smart communities or the green innovation grant program.
Indeed.
It's an or.
I really would do or. I mean, I want to talk to you guys further.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
We want to see, I know there was we talked about a lot of different planning areas. One of these grants might be able to cover 4 of the areas. One of the grants might be able to cover 2. And it might be worth doing both. It might not be, but I need to hone in. These are the grants that your projects fall into, but we want to dig a little bit. I need to go to the next level before I would say that's the one.
Because is it one of these that you had to reach 5 like milestones or something like
That's
that?
clean energy communities. So that one is not in the CFA. But clean energy communities is step 1, and you eventually become potentially a climate smart community, which this SIP grant, which is the same thing that we are talking about, but it's a different program.
Because I think when we talked before, we've already have 2 or 3 of these things.
If you decide to
done.
engage in the climate smart clean energy communities program, which is 4 out of 10 high impact items, that's gonna, which is, I obviously recommend, again, not a CFA. The clean energy communities is not part of the CFA. Climate smart communities is. The Clean Energy Communities program allows you to get 4 out of 10 high impact items, and the town receives $5,000. let's do it. There's no reason not to. Climate smart community is the next level of clean energy community. And there's two categories in the climate smart community, and that's preparing a plan to become a climate smart community. And that plan may very well fit all the needs that Brent was discussing as far as planning. And then it has an implementation phase for funding. So what we'd be looking at for the planning of revitalizing the hamlet would be the climate smart community category. Clean energy community is you want to get that first before you start. If you apply for a climate smart community implementation grant and you don't even have clean energy community, they're not going to. There's
Okay.
too many other people ahead of you.
No, that's fine.
But I recommend that with local record, like that's in the over here, local records management, clean energy community, Rochester Foundation for Fish, Rochester Community Foundation. Under the CFA, I would recommend climate smart community plan under planning or green innovation grant program under planning. And that's the conversation I'm hoping to have with you guys Thursday. Because I need more information. I need to have the guidance of both of them and be like, does your project align more to this or to this?
Right, and I'm leaning away from the green innovation with regards to the hamlet.
Okay.
I don't think, we would need real estate in the hamlet to do green
Yeah, it
innovation with
takes-
our
and it takes-
stormwater.
And when you go towards green energy or green construction, it's more expensive. But we're talking about rain gardens, permeable pavement, stormwater control. But they're more advanced technologies that end up.
And a lot of that stuff there is also in the state right away.
Oh,
So we'd have to get the state on board.
that's gonna take another year, but let's just be realistic.
And that's what I'm saying, realistic. I don't see a
Nope.
lot of low hanging fruit with
Nope.
CFA.
I do not either. I do not either. And also another one that was recommended in the comprehensive plan was by Labella was Empire State Development Strategic Planning.
Yeah.
I'm happy to show it to you. I'm happy to go through it, but I would recommend it for this.
I think, in my opinion, as I'm looking over here, the things that you put over here in this pile, I think it helps get the town's feet wet, the town board's feet wet, get us used to spelling grants and understanding the level of work, like what you said with the Main Street. I think we need to get up to speed before we start talking to businesses about what would need to be done for their money. If we get inundated with the paperwork, I would hate to see what's gonna happen. Well, I know what's gonna happen with the private business.
Yeah.
They're gonna pull their hair out and say, why did you do this when you can't help me? Guide me along the way.
You absolutely want to be strategic. I wrote the Main Street grant for the city of Canandaigua, both the planning followed by the implementation. And it's difficult. You're working with the state, and you got to follow the state's rules when COVID came. So you do, and that's exactly where you want to be on approaches to grants. Don't be like, let's rush and do this. It's like, what's going to work for us? Let's have a success under our belts. These are our top priorities. So that's kind of where, I can't tell you what your priorities are. I'm looking at the comprehensive plan, but I think just to what you're saying, local records management, perhaps Rochester Community Foundation to help fish if you'd like. And then we start on the clean energy communities. Clean energy community, again, I love clean energy community and local records management because each of them come with a regional representative from the state. So it's not just, you don't have to just believe me, and no matter what happens to me, they still have a job to be helping you. It's just a matter of making sure that you're aware of that and putting them in touch. And then we set up a meeting, like, all right, let's do this. Like, let's get this ball rolling.
Another thing I could see that might be lower hanging fruit, I think we talked about last year with solar on the highway roofs. But maybe we get our feet under ourselves before. I don't know if that's NYSERDA.
NYSERDA, so NYSERDA, of course, is a very third party.
Pretty arduous. for people. So,
And NYSERDA is actually going to be clean energy communities. So let's get our feet wet with clean energy communities. and then move on to the solar.
So I'm sorry, can I interrupt you for a second? So when it comes to solar, like if we, just for argument's sake, somehow or another, we got some type of grant to put some solar panels on the highway department roof. And does that, do we necessarily have to work with a power company, so to speak, to put that back on the grid? Or is there a way, or are there grants available, like if we just wanted to keep that power in-house at the highway department?
Am I the town parent? I'm not, but I work with them too. Yeah, they have this whole other electric power, they got their own power, and it's like, well, we're different, like indeed you are. What happens is the state has initiatives, and they work with third parties to help them meet those initiatives. NYSERDA is a huge one. So NYSERDA doesn't represent one program. NYSERDA represents 7 or 8 different programs. And you work with them as you choose. Depending on the solar funding available at that time, the state in the past has identified 4 pre-approved solar companies that they'll want you to then work through, depending on what solar work you're looking at. Solar initiatives, I just did it's called a letter of intent to the Department of Energy for a solar project in Genesee County this morning. You know, they're looking at megawattage, and they're looking at agrivoltaic, which is solar and ag together, and how they can work together. So when it comes to solar, I think the way they're going to deliver funding and the contract you're going to have to work under, or who you work under, or what you have to produce is changing, and it's changing fast. So I never jump at solar. If someone wants solar, let's do it. We can look at it, we can research it, let's look at the benefits. What I've seen is I've seen solar panels go from this big to this big.
Mhm.
And if these communities had waited 5 years, they could have 80 million more of these than they have these. Technology is upgrading, but the state's anxious, and they do have a deadline. It's 2023 and then 2025. There's these different deadlines. And as we get closer, more funding is going to come out for them. I think it'd be good to learn solar, and we'll learn a little bit about solar, getting in the Clean Energy Communities program, and we can start meeting with NYSERDA. Let's ask NYSERDA. Let's say we're a town of this many people. What's going on? What have you seen? You're not the first. Other communities have done it. We don't need to be the big guinea pig. Like, what's going on? What have we seen? Do you think that funding's going to change? So unless you guys are full-fledged solar and you've got someone very similar to Michelle that loves solar, then I say you run. But at this point with solar, I think it's good to be getting more understanding and education.
So when you talked about Parrington, does that power that they produce with solar, does it stay within their town government, or does it stay within the town of Parrington?
I don't know, but I can
Okay.
find out.
Right, I was just curious,
I talked
because we had a solar farm come into town, and
Okay,
they're not online yet, but they're getting closer.
okay.
And they came in and they wanted a tax break.
I was gonna say a solar permit, but
Yeah, well,
a tax
yeah.
break too.
Yeah,
Okay.
they went through the permit process, but they also wanted a tax break.
Mhm,
And so when I said to them, I go, okay, where's this power going? You know,
mhm.
it's going back to the grid. So it could end up at the house next door to the solar farm, or it could end up at a house downstate somewhere, upstate somewhere, wherever.
Yeah,
And so we said, no. We said, no, you're gonna, you know, if it's there's no sustainable jobs, there's nothing that is some big, huge beneficial to the town of Mendon.
what's the return? Yeah.
Right, because
Yeah.
there's a trickle coming, that's probably coming back to the town of Mendon, so to speak. And that's why I was just curious, because I told him, I said, if you had a way to keep that power in the town of Mendon to our residents, then let's talk.
Absolutely.
Or-
Direct benefit to our
or-
residents for
or
having a solar. farm.
Provide it, or if we had them on our highway department, and that power stayed in our highway department, so every time the mechanic used electricity, so to speak,
Mhm.
and somebody turned on a light switch in the highway department, we knew that was coming from there. I think that, I'm just curious how all that works, because I don't know.
I haven't been involved in a lot of solar negotiations. But I find they're all different because the company can offer different incentives to different towns. But I think you're very smart to be looking for an incentive from the company combined with incentive from the state. Because the state wants us to move forward. Companies are looking to grow and to do this, and there's nothing saying that you can't say, all right, you can't provide my people with electricity, but can you provide the town a check for $5,000 a month because you're in our community and that will go towards our total budget. This is uncharted territory. There's no reason you can't ask. They're coming to you, so you want to use that wisely, and it's not good to jump in it.
Sure.
However, if you're thinking about it and you've now had a couple meetings with NYSERDA, you've learned how some other companies can do it, or I'm sorry, other municipalities have done it, specifically how other municipalities have done roofs on highways. And I did talk to Town of Canandaigua when they didn't on their new highway garage. So I talked to Doug about that. See how a couple other communities do it and then see if that makes sense through one of the programs. Yeah, and municipal, if it's on a municipal building, do you own it? Does the company own it?
Right,
Could
and
be
then,
owning
who
issues.
maintains it, if it becomes outdated, like you're saying, when it went from this size to this size,
Right,
how do we ensure that the town's not gonna be stuck with some huge bill to, when it's in glass and shingles someday and solar panels are a thing of the past.
right, and there's nowhere to recycle them.
Right.
Yes, so
Yeah,
those are the kinds of things that concern me. So.
as they should. I hate to say solar isn't a necessity, but it's something that you just want to be looking into. But you don't have the need to make any knee-jerk decisions to them. And if someone asked me about it, I would say, I'm going to get my solar friends together and let's do a call and we can ask them questions. I work with a solar company out of California, but they have a place locally here. If I don't know, it's the right thing to do is to ask questions and
So,
keep looking into it.
so like this NYSERDA and these other things,
Mhm.
does that prerequisite that you're getting your power from RG&E or National Grid or?
Well, see, even RG&E and National Grid have their own programs.
Okay,
They also are now becoming third parties with the state.
okay, so they're gonna cut out the middle.
They can get incentives as well. So I've seen it change. NYSERDA is certainly one, but NYSERDA doesn't supply power. But they might have the contract with RG&E and with different organizations. Or the organization might be able to offer something to an incoming business and say, there's a connection to the grid here, we'll put solar panels here and we can give you this deal. There's leeway there that hasn't been, because the technology like this hasn't flown in so quickly. So I don't
Sorry, I
have.
didn't mean to get too far. in the
No, I
weeds,
mean,
but I
this
was
is-
just curious.
This is reality and you want to know the kind of person, if you end up working with me, how I'm going to react to that. I'm not going to say, oh, you want solar, let's do it. Because I'm going to be like, well, let's talk and make sure.
No,
Because
I agree with you, because I think solar is one of those things you need to make sure you're headed down the right path.
yeah. And there's still a lot of research. I'm seeing federal grants and writing federal grants for more research because it's not done being researched. But someone passed a law saying they have to use this much solar. So they're like, oh crap, now we're all trying to balance it out. And when that happens, well, other things are available to happen too, like, oh, that law that we have to be at this amount of power by 2025, just postpone that 5 years, we're fine. Things can change. So we don't want to feel strapped by things we don't have to feel strapped by,
The original soundbite sounded,
which was what?
which was, 5 years, we're gonna be,
Yeah.
some amount of percentage solar, and then they'll kick the can.
Someone
down
got
the road.
elected on it, I swear, I'm
Yeah.
sure. But now when I'm seeing the federal government, there were 3 categories in this grant that I'm writing. 2 for research and 1 to be a test, so have farm to be a test pilot. I luckily am working with a farm that's going to be the test pilot, but they're putting more money towards studies. They don't They're like, we get it, this isn't working, like the amount it's costing and what's coming out, it's not working. We've got to study how to make this more efficient. So I'm a little, I guess, this just happened this morning. You know, like I'm in solar a little bit at that level, seeing like, they don't even know. They're still looking for research, which makes me say, this is gonna take a little bit longer than originally intended.
Sure.
So, and then again, with the ambulance and the building of the roof, I know they're talking about potentially solar for that.
Well, no, we weren't talking about solar for the ambulance.
Oh, it wasn't for the ambulance?
No, it needs the ambulance building needs a new roof, period.
Oh, just a new roof in general?
Correct, but it's jointly owned by the village and the town, the building is.
Yes.
So, because I had thought that maybe what little I know about grants, sometimes if there's multiple municipalities involved, that helps.
Indeed, if someone gets to lose their job and taxes go down. So there's local state government grants. And so if you share an assessor between two, each town had an assessor. City of Geneva, City of Canandaigua, each had an assessor. They fired one and now there's only one. They got grant money for that.
I got you.
Because
A town and a village.
it doesn't matter, as long as the tax rolls are going down and the amount that's being.
That's been in place for years and years.
Oh, so we're not going from.
Yes,
to-
right. They're not gonna reward good behavior.
Oh.
Let's be very clear. Which is what they say.
Oh, okay.
They're like, that's a great idea. We came up with it. You know, we've been doing it for 20
How
years.
about each register?
Yeah.
Yeah, the problem is there again, we're still doing it. So but we don't have we don't have an agreement with East Rochester. Jim
If you're
has
thinking
a-
about it though, let's keep that in
Yeah.
the noggins. We're gonna get some grant money for it.
Maybe they-
Right.
But
yeah,
it's a loss of a job. They want less government. Well, no, they want more government.
Yeah,
yeah.
They want less
That's
down
probably
here.
better.
And what you
Do
do.
as I
is
say, not as I do.
right.
So, and it's shifting. We just shifted governors and so there's a lot of not sure exactly where we're going, but tread lightly. But so when it comes to combining, yeah, you're not gonna, until you can show that the taxes go down and the cost to residents has gone down and you've limited government. It's a difficult grant to, I'll print it out. We can take a look at it. We can say, is this something we could do? And that one's rolling, so it's not CFA. But in the end, it's like, okay, we're gonna lose a department, we're gonna lose people. You have to shake up and redesign your departments.
I mean, a few years ago, there was a big push in the state for shared services. And so the county put together this big program and they brought in all these people who told us what to
Yeah,
do.
Ontario did it too.
Yeah,
Yep.
from Monroe County. And, I sat down with the village of Honey Falls in like 2 hours. We came up with like a dozen things that we were already doing. And so we put it into to it. And the way I understood it at the time was that there was supposed to be, we had to put an amount to each thing we shared. And then that amount went to factored into the whole county program. And then the state was going to reward the county with some money. And then that money was going to filter down to us.
That is a
And-
different
and-
program.
And-
Yes.
And what we got was the big fat zero out of that.
Slap on it.
Yeah,
Good job.
attaboy. That's what we got. But
Um,
we actually had more things in there than any other two municipalities in Monroe County. And we've been doing them for years. And so
Awesome.
we didn't have to reinvent the wheel or anything like that, but it just,
They were probably, could you write all this down so we could use it as a sample?
Yeah,
Think about the other
and
communities.
I just found it,
Yeah, and so that was money to
Incredible.
the county, and then the
Yes.
counties were applying based on information they gathered. So there's
Yes.
always 3 levels, federal, state, and local.
sure.
There is a grant that is offered by the state government to local governments if 2 local governments decided to work together. They also did it through the counties. And of course, they're gonna do a bigger county like Monroe County. And I think Ontario County did something too, where they got it and they got a budget of money. Of course, the county can then do what they'd like with it. And then people could apply towards that money. But it's a matter of if you got it. You know what? That one is I'm sorry, that one's recycling. That one's recycling for, and closing the landfill. But that's just it's another example of, well, funding might go to a county and then the municipalities can apply as opposed to state money coming from the state agency. So, so you're not wrong. It happens and it still happens. But you have to you've got to fit. The peg's got to go perfectly in the hole. Otherwise, but there are going to be pegs that fit the hole. Local records management, clean energy community. Let's start conversations with solar.
5 years of tags.
Mhm. That's going to be ongoing. Once we start it, man.
I know just from things you have here, and I know I forgot what the WPW or UPWP stands for, but sidewalks in the Hampton, that's a big thing with residents, is more walk accessibility, accessibility to the Lehigh Valley Trail from the sidewalks, things like that are big things for folks. I mean, I even know people who live in the town who drive into the village just to walk around the sidewalks.
Right. Yeah.
So.
It's gorgeous. I actually went to the town hall first because I thought I read on this agenda that was the town hall. I'm just seeing people parking and, going for walks. It's beautiful. It's awesome. And, but sidewalks are difficult to justify. Why should one town get one over another? Everybody wants sidewalks. How much is too much sidewalks? How much is too little sidewalk? So you'll see in my recommendation so the UPW, Unified Planning Work Program, that eventually works towards funding from Department of State, which is where sidewalk funding comes from. That's Department of State, I'm sorry, Department of Transportation. I'm like, oh, they passed my bedtime almost now. But the UPWP program allows for a plan to have your current sidewalks evaluated and then identify what would be the top things or the top ones that should be fixed, perhaps. And you're working at the Genesee Regional Planning, and that's not the state. So there's a little bit more wiggle room. There's a lot more, there's free flow information, again, examples of previous municipalities. And if you have a plan from them and use that plan to apply for funding at DOT, you're in a much better standing. So when it comes to sidewalks, you want a plan. If you go directly to the Department of Transportation, apply for TAP, TIP, they changed all the names, something the school safety to schools, they've changed the name every day. And then, but to get that funding, you've got to have a plan, and your plan has to be better than everybody else's. Sidewalk funding is extremely difficult. If it is a #1 priority for your community, I recommend, you want it sooner rather than later. That's something I would say, depending on if it's a priority, and ARPA funding all day long. Because you don't live in a community where people don't have cars and need
Right.
sidewalks. You live in a community where people have multiple cars and multiple parks. You've got to know who you're up against. It's not what anybody ever wants to hear when it comes to sidewalk, but I could say, yeah, apply for the TAP grant, $7,000 to write that grant. You're never going to, not in the position you're in right now. If you had a plan and had worked with Genesee Finger Lakes, got letters of recommendation, brought in DOT, had them come around, take a look and say, if we could just connect this place to this place, Also that plan, if you identify the top 4 spaces of sidewalk that you'd like improved, you might be able to bite, as long as you've got that documentation, you can bite away at those 4 projects, potentially through other projects. And through, like, say if you do a climate smart community grant and you want to reduce the amount of people driving, well, one of the initiatives we're going to do is do the sidewalk from here to here, which we know is on Main Street, the most, walked about, and here's the plan for it.
So if Tom drives down to the cottage versus the walks from many farms, we could get a grant.
Probably. Depends how fast and if we have a drone.
It's not driving there, it's driving back.
So, yeah, so that's kind of the best thing to position yourself for sidewalks would be to start with a plan. And UPWP is not in CFA, so we're not in like, you can plan that out.
Sure.
I would really encourage you to talk to some of the local organizations on that planning, and they've done this, what they do. They are the experts, and they can say, listen, I've never seen a community like you get TAP funding. But what I did see is in 3 years, they did a GIGP grant, and they were redoing a park, and that park happened to be next to this where there was flooding, and they did permeable pavement and a rain garden and threw in the sidewalk, and it was part of this project. And sidewalks are paid for by the local match, because it wasn't eligible in the grant, but it was paid for in the local match.
But is that the one that you mentioned would pay for the plan also? Is that the Finger Lakes?
UPWP is the plan.
Okay, so that is.
That's a plan, yes. That there is an application, but you're not applying, what's nice is you're not applying to the state, and you're not competing with the whole state.
Yeah.
You're applying to Genesee Finger Lakes, and you're.
And then we can get that plan
Get
for
that plan.
the hamlet. And
That plan can be broken up into 6 phases, and then phase 1 might be towards GIGP in 2 years. You know, sidewalk 2 might be a perfect fit with, a sewer rebuild. Sidewalk 3, is a perfect, and the solar guy comes back and he wants to build on that thing, great, put that sidewalk in.
Or the Angelo, guy that wants to expand down at the the grocery store.
But until you have
put
that,
in phase 3.
when you have plans and documentation, plans and documentation, they're not fun. I'm not a planner, but by trade or anything, but it's what allows you, it greases the wheels for opportunity, for funding, and to have and say, if a company comes and says, we want to do this, well, I'm sure you do, but that's going to affect our town negatively. But what you could do is put in these sidewalks. I think you guys may or may not know, town of Farmington, it's in their code. You do not build, and if there is not sidewalk in front of the building you're building on, you are responsible for building that sidewalk. You pay for it. The company, the municipality will then take it over and clear it, but you have to connect it from whoever's got it from either side to either side. So it's just something they did. Now they're younger and they're growing, and they, and I could say they don't need sidewalk, you need that. It's all a matter of opinion, but they were able to interpret that in code. So there's a lot of ways it's going to, multiple ways it's going to catch, if you will. So we want to be thinking about those things, particularly when it's, and that's why I kind of honed in on these items, because these were the priorities of the town. So yeah, so I think the next thing that you guys would want to do is kind of look at, what you think. We can talk the plan on Thursday, and if in the end we don't do a CFA, we don't do a CFA. It's not good, we got to do what's best for the community. And then, but as far as the other ones, we can take a look at. Do you want to look at one? We know there's probably 4 we should look at. UPWP for sidewalk, local records management improvement fund for Michelle records, clean energy communities, because that gets you into. There's a pathway there. It's a road you're going to have to go down. Just go down this path, start it, and get the reward of the $5,000. The other one, fish. And again, I would caution that fish is one organization within a town, and it's shared in multiple communities. What might be good to negotiate is, if you have someone writing that, is that they're writing these grants and we'll write that one as complementary. Because you want to, as a town, want to be careful. You have so many great organizations. It's not going to be easy. You never want to be saying what's worth it and what's not.
Right.
And how do you identify this needs it and this needs it now?
Figure winners and losers.
Correct. Because if they need $1,000, honestly, I could throw a tea party and we could raise it this weekend.
Right.
So we've got to we want to be very smart, especially as you're starting out with grants, what we focus on and what we do. And now, as I would also be happy to provide, if there was someone in that organization, you know, once I'm usually working with the community, they'll say, can you help this person or just point them in the direction? I can point people all day. I'm not writing them a grant, but I'm pointing them and saying, this is the website, you should look here. You know, this is where it is, if I know about it. Or I might say, I don't know where it is. But that was the other one, thank you, that we had discussed.
So,
Then the climate smart communities, right? Not for the CFA.
Right, that was the point I talked about, under
Yeah.
CFA, one of those plans we should talk about potentially doing.
Yeah, potentially down the road.
Yeah.
It's gonna be the
Like the
long haul on
next
that
year's
one. Oh, it's gonna be the long haul on Hamlet coming up.
Well, wasn't there a deadline for that one?
So climate smart communities, and now remember, multiple things fit in different categories, but for putting together a plan, climate smart communities has a plan category, and then Green Innovation Grant Programs also has a planning category where you can plan, have an engineer, you're paying an engineer to come in and do a plan.
Yes.
But what I want to make sure, and luckily he's an engineer, which is super great, is like, are you ready for an engineering firm to come in? Because this report's got to be done in a year from now. And if it's not, and you're still fine tuning exactly what it is, well, let's keep thinking about it and fine tuning it and apply next year and be ready to go. So that's what I want to talk to you about further,
Okay.
to kind of show you, and I did bring copies of those grants and the differences of what they're looking for.
Okay.
To see if that fits the variety of different plans that would be ideal. Because having planning studies gives the town power. I mean, it gives them an understanding of where they are and where they can go.
Sure.
so for what we've contracted you for
Mhm.
is through this meeting and the one later this week.
Mhm. Yeah, and to make sure you guys feel comfortable, like I'm not running around, I'm not gonna be like, all right, you know,
No, but I just want to make sure that I understand, the board understands.
yeah,
That is pretty much what we're paying you for.
yes.
To take it to the next step, which is to write the grants
Mhm.
for these things, or to get us in a position to write the grants, that's kind of step 2
Yes,
to contracting with you.
correct. And what you would
Right,
want to do is
okay.
identify what grants you're looking at and see if they kind of blend together. And it might be as well, if you guys are looking for, you know, continuous grant guidance in addition to grant writing, maybe it's, you know, a monthly retainer, and you just continue with the local records management is just included in that. Because some of these grants, similar to clean energy community and local records management, they're very long-term. And so you don't want to say, oh, we'll do this and we'll have a 6-month contract, and then the contract's up and it's not done, because then what happens?
Sure.
So it will depend on, and I will put together a contract that I think is best suited for the town and for the grants that they're looking to accomplish. UPWP, you write it, you're done. Local records management, that doesn't happen for a very long time, but we'll start now. And clean energy communities could happen very quickly, because particularly where you guys are, and then it's done. You know, that might be done, or there might be a hiccup and it might take a little bit longer. So I'd want to see where you guys wanted, we're interested in most putting
Sure.
your, you know, what you wanted to focus on, and then we could go from there. So, but I'm very flexible, and I work with a lot of organizations because they need different things, different times, honestly. And so that's kind of always worked. Or you pay me hourly. It doesn't matter, like, you know, I can do, it's that's how I work. There are a lot of other firms that do, and I can't say a lot, there used to be 2 or 3. They don't even really exist anymore. Where as a municipality, how they would do it, because it would work better for your budget, is they would charge approximately an average of $40,000 a year, not including advising, and that's, we might recommend to you and or write a couple grants. And then you might never hear from them. And if you don't know about the grant, you're never going to hear about the grant. You're never going to decide that, hey, can you write me this grant? That's not a model that I support. I don't think that works.
Gotcha. Sure.
for as far as being able to really help communities move forward and understand the process that they're in.
Because one thing I noticed is that once, and I don't know how they share, they do research to get all these emails or whatever. But I mean, I would say, if not every day, 2 to 3 times a week, I'm getting emails, oh, you should apply for this grant, oh, you should apply for that grant, kind of a thing.
Yeah,
And I forwarded a couple of them to you, and
Yep.
you were like, you very nicely said, yeah, I know about it. And
well, don't you ever very nice, I want to make sure you're aware of this, I'm like, yep, I'm like,
Yeah.
that's
but
that
they make it
was-
sound like, it's like,
easy.
you know,
Free money,
you put your dime in and you get your gumball.
Exactly, and it isn't.
Yeah.
So a lot of times what I do is I'm on retainer as, and on an advisement level, so the entire staff can just call me and just be like, I got this email, can you just read it? And I do that quite a lot, and that's what I'll do, I'll take an hour, usually it's an hour or two, it's usually a 90-page guidance, and I read it, and then I'll be like, this doesn't work for you, and let me tell you why.
Sure.
This, I think I mentioned as an example previously, that there was one that ended up being like 3-to-1 matching funds, and it's like, stupid. You had to like crowdfund it, crowdsource fund, I'm like, you're not gonna do crowdsource $1 million, like, you're just not gonna do it. But you look in a little bit, you gotta peel the onion back, if you will.
Sure.
And if the town is getting a lot of those and the town isn't familiar with those, that might be then something where I would consider, where it's like, all right, let's incorporate in the cost and into the services that, I come to at least one town board meeting a month, or, that I come to the, I show up to the town board to, visit town hall, have office hours, or, we can customize that to what the town, what's best for the town. But yeah, there are a lot that fly out there. Now, a lot was happening during ARPA. So try to see those emails now and say, is that ARPA and CARES Act, which was this huge thing of, spike of grant money. But it probably, you might find that lessens as it comes out, or it might increase. You don't know, it depends on how many emails you get.
Sure.
So I'm sorry, I've taken so much of your
Well, it's fine. Very educational.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And also, as I kind of said, I put in as our next steps. Just want to make sure that you guys feel comfortable with the information. If we want to do another meeting, I'm happy to meet with you guys or talk through anything once you have more time to look at it, or send you information, for the next couple of weeks, and then help you through a decision if you, and let you know of there are a couple other companies in the area that do grant writing with me. But, want to make sure that you're aware of everything, so you don't feel like, why did I know about this? Type of thing. So,
No problem.
all right,
Thank you very
and
much.
yeah, feeling good? Okay, grants aren't that bad. They're not that bad.
Thank you so much.
Oh my
Thanks.
gosh, my pleasure. Thank you.
So, let me move on to, where am I here? The Sprague Park budget. So then, you have that, I did provide this previously, but we've updated it a little bit. We have, it will require the board, not tonight, but to do some transfers, budgetary transfers going forward. Both from reserve funds and from things in the 2022 budget. And I think that gets us where we need to be. Expense wise, I've been over the expenses with both Brent and Jason from Labella. I think we're pretty close there. Would you agree, Brent?
Yeah, yes.
Where we think we're gonna be, we have a contingency in there as well, just so that don't want to be caught short, so to speak. And as all you have to do is put gas in your car on a Wednesday and then go back on a Thursday and find out that the price went up. So we're obviously the contracts, the soft costs and the contracts, if we approve it tonight with Whitney East are locked in. But and with Mary Taylor, we're locked in, but the septic is still flowing. The materials testing, that's a guesstimate, so to speak. Legal is pretty firm. So most of our costs are pretty, after tonight, could be pretty well nailed down. And I think even the septic will have something a lot firmer relatively soon. But it doesn't it requires using $300,000 of the ARPA money, which totals about $650,000. And that would get us to where we need to be.
So I'll make a motion to accept the budget presented by the supervisor. Amend the spray park not to exceed $1,666,000 and 0 cents.
I'll second.
Any other discussion?
So, yeah, I think, Andy, you guys did the deep holes last week, right? And the other areas, and it sounds like they didn't do well. Yeah, 1 out of 6 passed. 1 out of 6 passed. So it very well, it might end up being in the original proposed location uphill. So we might need a pump station, which John kind of was alluding to. The septic will get buttoned down on what that actual cost is. But I think that contingency that's in there, we have enough to cover. If we bump it up to that original location. But we have also, as a town, done our diligence now, so we know why we have to bump it up, why gravity does not
What
work.
was the,
Original location
Up by
on
the
the
road.
soccer field side.
Yeah, the soccer field side up towards, I would almost call it Sibley, up towards Semmel Road. They've got some nice soils up there. And the original layout of the building, it would have been fed by gravity, but I think John took a look at it. I don't think it made sense with the sun. The spray park was gonna be in the shade because of the building.
Not good.
Yeah.
So it made sense to flip it, right?
Right?
You don't want it to be in the shade.
No.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's a reasonable budget, and I think it's and the funding sources are very reasonable. Certainly, depending on what happens with Bending Green, the developers fund could go up by a substantial amount of money. And how fast that all happens, because they have to pay their rec fee to get a building permit, and that is the rec fee is $1,500 per. So 30 homes in there at $1,500 a piece. A little bit of addition to that fund. Did anybody else have any questions about any of the expenses or funding sources?
I'm sorry.
no, I'm sorry, I might have just misheard something. You said 600,000 for ARPA?
That's the amount
That's the-
that we will receive
We were
as
receiving
a
it.
total. We got about half of it. We get half of it last year and half of it this year, the same by August.
Okay, so using 300 of that.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And what is the personnel use center? Is that what we're saving?
Well, it's in the budget. We budgeted to open it January 1st, 2022.
Oh, okay,
And obviously we did.
because we've got that.
Right,
okay.
so
Yeah.
what I did was, I basically, from some of those lines, I have to, that way we're gonna, if hopefully we open it in September,
Yeah,
we're not gonna spend half the money that's in that line, but there's no way we're gonna spend more than half. That's for sure, in 4 months. We're not gonna spend half of the money we put in the budget, like for director and personnel and things like that.
Sure.
Anything else? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We'll move on to number 7, which is consideration of bids.
Make a motion to accept the recommendation by Labella for the Mendon Spray Park not to exceed $1,199,800 from Whitney East to include alternate one metal roof, budget provided by the supervisor and approved by the town.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
I think, I kind of did open, if you'll notice between number 1 and number 2 of the base bids, there's only a $1,300 difference.
Yeah.
Between those bids. That's a pretty tight bid, which gives me confidence in both numbers. And talk a lot about metal roofs versus shingled roofs. I'm a big fan of metal roofs. They are
Forever.
They are forever. Will the building, will any of us be sitting here in 25 years talking about when we got to reshingle that roof? I don't know. But you know what? That metal roof will still be there.
Right.
John will be, and Carol will be going. But I think that's what my opinion is. And, metal roof is, we knew the bids were gonna go up some. from
Yeah,
last
I agree
year.
that
And to be honest with you, I'm glad they didn't go up more when we had to rebid it. That was a
Right.
fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were still, John, if I'm not mistaken, we're still right in that area that we were before when we bid it out with 4 contracts.
Exactly. And as you can see, Whitney East was vetted by Labella. They talked to the project manager and the estimator, and they felt like they had a good handle on the project. And of course, this does not include the military memorial, which that contract we already awarded to CP Board.
I don't know if this is the time or place, but do they have an estimate as to when they can break ground and?
I kind of alluded to that to Jason, Brent, and I know you guys kind of talked over my head pretty quick. So, because you started talking about this needs to happen, and then that happens, and then this happens, but we were kind of thinking, correct me if I'm wrong, that kind of later summer.
Later summer, I would expect, once they get this notice of award, they start putting the paperwork together to get the contracts. in motion. So we could be, if they broke ground, after July 4th, I think we're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Because they seem to think that they might be done by Labor Day.
Really?
Wow.
Am I correct in what was said?
That's,
Wow.
that's where I think Jason was thinking, which is not, it's not a huge project. This is a big project for us.
Right.
Yes.
But when it comes to contractors, it's not a huge project. They got the big equipment. We're not, we'd be out there with a load of tractors going, how do you order this thing? So these guys, they'll do the site work in a couple of days.
Got my garden gloves.
Yeah. If it's not done by fourth or by Labor Day, can John be out there with a hose?
Spraying everybody.
I do have a reasonable, we'll be having an open next year.
That'd be
Labor Day, we
awesome.
can try everything.
Yeah, I think, as far as a grand opening kind of thing, I think, if it's Memorial Day next year, this time next year, I'll be thrilled.
Yeah.
Because on a hot day like it was today, my place would be.
I'm just laughing, that that'll be the time when it's snowing, right?
Yeah.
We'll have snow on Memorial Day.
Because we know we can have that in many cars.
That's right.
That's right with you.
So, No,
I think it's good to see it.
I think so, and I think people, I've had people ask me about this project, and I've told them all the same thing. I'd rather do it right than do it fast. And, we certainly need to conform to all the legalities. And because we didn't get a bid on that one, that definitely pushed us back and probably closed the window that would make us it open this year. But that's the way it goes.
We had a few bumps in the road that we negotiated.
Gotcha.
Negotiated through.
Anything else? I think we're ready to vote unless somebody has something else to say. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Back to public comment. Dan,
I really want to talk about solar. The village is exploring community choice aggregate, I believe it's called. So it could be worth talking to them about that for the shared service or not, whatever. And as I understand the law, I can be wrong here, it's illegal to discriminate based on gender and other stuff. And I heard interesting discussion about MWBE, which if I understand what described, that sounds like state required discrimination based on gender.
Correct.
Just for your consideration.
point well taken, Danny.
Yes.
Thank you. As always, you always have some great points.
Yes, always.
Yes. Anything else? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Emily. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.